Hello. We're here for our weekly romance oracle message. Let's see what we are dealing with this week in our love lives. How do we need to direct our energy and our focus? I have a feeling we're going to be directed inward because we are in the 3 difficult weeks. And then within that period, there's like this kind of straddling situation that happens that starts the 9 days of Av, which is the first 9 days of Leo, starting with the new moon on Tuesday. So we are in a period of that would be best served in self-reflection and evaluation and taking heed of that information and then letting it kind of germinate into awareness rather than rushing forward or making things happen or like planting new seeds right now. Risk. Ooh, it's a risky time to start new things. But part of the risk of this leg of the path here is that we are in a period of tests. So the risk is, when I've tried to start or initiate things this time of year before, and this is a period of 3 weeks or so that happens every summer during the Cancer Leo period. And so I've tried starting things during this time, and it's never good because it's seeded with this inherent kind of negative energy, because that's just the energy of the atmosphere during this period. So it's suggested not to buy like a house or something during that time, or a big purchase, anything that's going to have like long-term consequences, or you're going to be locked into something long-term. It's best to just let the dust settle and initiate that after this period. A lot of reflection and insight will come on the other side of this. A lot of clarity will come on the other side of this reflection. So, we've all been in situations where we've been in the eye of the storm, and the healing transformational process is happening in such a whirlwind that we don't realize how fast and how much we are changing and evolving until we've had a chance to get to the other side of that portal and the dust settles. So I think we're going to be surprised when we get to the end of these few weeks, and we're going to be glad that we didn't do anything rash, because our fire, our hot-headedness, our temper is sort of like being triggered or tempted with this Leo kind of tests themes. And, when we were in the influence of Cancer, or while we are still in the influence of Cancer, our feelings can be very sensitive as well. So it's a risky time to initiate anything, but it is a good time to get deeper clarity on what needs to be tweaked and changed within ourselves. Right. And we're coming up on our spiritual new year during Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, which will be happening like in probably September, October. And then we have 6 months until the end of this calendar year. So it's like, how do we want to finish strong? Like when we're evaluating our, we have a little less than 6 months, but when we're evaluating who we are, who we're becoming, how we want to finish this last, quarter or so of the year, like what changes would we like to initiate? All right. But, and part of that is embracing truth, right? Being real with ourselves, and then being in alignment with that truth. It's so interesting. This card came up because in the Torah portion today, we were studying from the Tikkun Zohar, which is the commentary on the commentary of the Zohar, which is the commentary on the Torah and the writings, the Tanakh. So the lesson today was focused on does our inside reflect our outside? Generally, the passage was talking about if a man's words don't match his inside, then he can't come to the assembly to study the Torah. He can't make that connection. He's like impure. So he has to get his thoughts in integrity with his words, because his inside has to be reflected in his words and actions. Well, so how many times do we kind of mute our truth, and we pretend on the outside that something's okay, or that we're all right with something, or we hold back being honest with someone about how we really feel about a situation. And that might be for self-preservation or whatever, but sometimes there's a form of evil tongue that can be not speaking truth when we need to. And when we don't feel like we have space or the safety to be heard, or for our truth to be revealed or spoken or received, then it starts to shut down our heart, and we start to self-abandon, right? So basically, that when we are sitting there, like put yourself in a dysfunctional family gathering where there are certain family members there that you maybe deeply disagree with and you're not okay with. And when you're younger, you have you even see it playing out between the older people and the kid generation, when the adult feels slighted by the child, and then the adult's narcissism is like, well, you must hate me then, like if you don't show me absolute adoring affection and warmth, though, you must hate me. And then you see someone manipulating someone with that kind of language, not really respecting their own autonomy or consent, but rather trying to control and have that child do all the emotional lifting, enmeshment, for the adult to feel important, rather than not taking it personally because it's a child. Grow up, don't take the children so personally. They're kids, in fact, do take what they say personally, take it in as feedback, and take responsibility for that and do something with it. Don't just dismiss it, but also don't get butthurt over what a kid says and then manipulate them and control them with, So what that does then is the kid feels like they're forced to give the adult a hug and to be happy, say hi to them, say hi to that person, smile, hug them, be nice, show them you love them, all that bullying. And then you have to, don't talk to your elder like that. Don't disrespect them by, maybe disagreeing with them in a way that's not comfortable, so you see how things get twisted and manipulated. And then your truth is then, you don't feel comfortable anymore to bring it up. And so then you just play along. Everything's okay. There goes the uncle going off about this thing or that thing again. And everybody's just like, yeah, great. Oh, here comes, whatever authority figure in the family unit is off on one. And, it's, it's a violation of some kind, and you can't speak up because you feel like there's too many consequences to disturb the status quo, right? And so then you're sitting there being forced to play along to get along and pretend like everything's fine, when in reality, this feels like a violation of your truth and your integrity. And in a way it is, because this portion today was talking about, if you there's sometimes where, depending on how reactive you are in that moment, it may be more destructive to speak that truth. And in that case, you would, try to, discern, obviously, and discern timing and whatnot. But you can be quiet and not agree. You can listen and be quiet and not say anything. Sometimes people get the point when you don't respond at all and you just look at them. And that, that's not lying. It is not playing along. It's not performing in a way that's not true or not authentic to you, right? How many times in a romantic relationship do we, feel hurt by someone's behavior, or feel like they're maybe taking you for granted, but you have a fear of rejection or being too much trouble or whatever the voice is telling you, and you don't speak up. And so then it keeps happening, and it keeps making you feel worse, and it keeps building resentment within you, right? And you don't speak up. And so then you're kind of withholding, and you're not being fully honest. You're not being fully truthful. So your actions aren't in alignment with your intrinsic realm, right? or going along with something to fit in with the group because that's the group ideology, but actually it violates your moral and ethic code. And you're just going along to not be rejected or whatever. So we all know what integrity, looks like in a passing thought. But when we really think about it, how many times are we not in vibrational integrity? Something about our internal realm does not match the outer, right? For instance, like when you teach about spiritual concepts, if you don't live by what you're teaching or believe and try to be living by what you're teaching, then that hypocritical aspect is going to come back to bite you in the ass. You're going to be invited, first row into this process of learning the lesson. So you might, wonder why so many times, like I'm just so forthright about if I'm talking about a lesson, like say about overcoming hostility, I'll be like, I'm the first person here to tell you that I have hostility. So let's just like get the truth out right up front before we start to unpack this concept, right? So it is important that we are in a vibrational integrity, that we are vibrating with truth, right? But also discerning how that truth is delivered and when, and proactively, like we talk about a lot about the rules of proactive confrontation. Spiritual proactive confrontation. Bard, the storyteller, what story are we telling? We might be telling a story that is no longer, applicable to who we are now, right? Who we are now isn't who we were before. And if we want to have a different experience, even in the present, we have to start changing the story that we're telling ourselves about the present. What is the narrative? What narrative is your ego telling you? And then what narrative is your soul and your spirit telling you, right? So the bard is music, poetry, myth, history, enchantment of storytelling, right? So, what song are you singing, right? What tune are you singing? What are you telling people about yourself and your past? Are you speaking about yourself like you've been victimized, right? Or that you are less than? How are you speaking your story? Are you completely focused on the dysfunction of the past, or how this person and that person did this and this and that? Or are you still charged when you talk about, things that maybe eventually will be appropriate to talk about, but are you still charged? Is there still resentment right there under the surface? Is there still anger, right? So we need to address these so that when we are meeting new people and we're moving through the world, that we truly have the energy, and we project and we tell the story that really matches who we are on the inside, right? The stories we tell about ourselves, the things that we cling to, oh, well, I do this and that, or I am this and that, the labels, the hobbies, the beliefs, the things. Well, I've been, a part of this thing for however many years, and I've just continued to do it. But it's not really like you don't really love doing it anymore. It's like, well, and you've just, kind of held on to it because it's an identity, right? Like that kind of like for film with me, film was like a childhood dream to work in the film industry, and being in that career for a while was very fulfilling. But then eventually I hit a wall and it was not fulfilling anymore, and it was hard to leave because it had become a shell, a cloak, part of an identity, a label, right, about myself. I remember even when I was like 14, and at my school, everybody in like junior high especially started, like when we were all in elementary school, everybody was kind of similar as far as like the way we dressed and the music we listened to. We didn't know what we liked yet. We didn't know what categories we fit into quite yet. And so you go to junior high and you're like, oh, here are the categories. Are you, forgive the terminology here, but I'm going to, there were different types. There were like the hicks, who were like the country people, the farmers, and these are terms given to ourselves, right? And then there were the freaks, and I was part of the freaks. And we were like the punk rock people, the grunge people, everything on that spectrum of like 90s grunge, punk rock, alternative, all of that. And then there were the preps, and then there were, you know, jocks and cheerleaders and like different kind of categories of people, you know, people that were like into like the hip hop and like, you know, rap scene and all of that. And so we were kind of like very coordinated and organized, and our clothing matched our category. So I would have been always wearing like Adidas or Converse or Vans or some shoe that is associated like a Doc Marten with my general style. But then by the time I got to 8th grade, or sorry, for 7th and 8th grade, this was definitely the case. But when I went to 9th grade, we kind of changed schools, and we were like kind of starting to gradually get into the high school building. And I wanted some, I think they were New Balances. Like I wanted a pair of white high, like, you know, kind of high top. They weren't high top, but they were more athletic-y, you know, they were more like a preppy, you know, athletic shoe, but they were just a good looking shoe. And they were like these neat little New Balances, and they were, you know, kind of fashionable at the time. I kind of wanted to rock the look. I thought it would look clean with our dress code at school. But I remember telling my friend Jennifer, I was like, I like these shoes, but I can't get them because I'm a freak. And Jennifer looked at me, she goes, yeah, you're not really a freak that much. You know, you're not really that much of a freak. You're kind of, you know, you're kind of your own thing. And I was like, oh, wow, the burden of having to prop up this facade. It was just such a thinly veiled, you know, illusion. Like I was like, oh, wow. Cool, I guess I'm not that convincing anyway. I'm just a poser, so I can do whatever I want. So I think at that point, I just sort of like never gave myself hardcore rules again, you know, but it was like this story that I was telling myself, and I'm like, oh wow, is this even true? Like I still, you know, identify with the kind of essence of that group of, you know, core. I'll always be a Courtney Love. I'll always be a freak. But I will also wear, you know, clothing that would, you know, break rules, you know, and venture out. So that was my 14-year-old mentality, but I think that's a pretty simple kind of example that we can all kind of relate to. All right, and let's see, last but not least, you know, and I mean, how much do we kind of like the problem I think with early dating is that people want to overshare quickly because they feel like it's giving them a sense of intimacy, but it's kind of like a false unearned sense of intimacy, and it creates premature bonding before you really get to know someone enough to know whether this is a relationship you really want to nurture along. So I think too, you know, what songs we decide to sing, you know, and, you know, at what time. And so then we have another card coming up, says trust. So trust the path, trust the process, you know, careful where you step though, right? Because a misstep on a path where you're taking the path carelessly can lead to rolling an ankle, falling over and hurting yourself, right? So you have to let people earn trust over time. And once you know, in little increments, it's like when Brene Brown, the emotional research expert, in her book, I think it was Rising Strong, she talked about the trust jar. And she was like, you know, imagine your trust, and you can actually have one if you want, within your family unit or within a relationship. Your trust is like a jar full of marbles. And every time someone does something that builds trust, you add a marble to the jar. If it's a big act of, you know, something that shows real devotion and trust and real, you know, that kind of thing, then maybe you put a couple of marbles, right? But when someone does something to break your trust, take that marble out. And so it gives you a relationship to trust that is not just all encompassing, you know, black and white, on or off, but rather a spectrum that is earned and maintained and can cost you, right? It's a currency almost. And so then we have, and also we learn, it's not like, the first thing we need to do is learn to trust ourselves. And the way that we do that is to listen to that inner voice that says, don't keep investing and spending time with this person. They're the wrong person. And then we keep doing it anyway because that is an inconvenient voice. Well, we're breaking our trust because we didn't listen to the inner part of us that had a greater vantage point than our rose-colored glasses, the bias, and that has the warm, cute body in front of them, right? So learning to trust ourselves happens not just because we force ourselves to give ourselves like unconditional trust, but rather same deal with the marble jar. We earn trust with ourselves by being accountable to ourselves and being someone dependable to ourselves, and that can set boundaries and keep boundaries and respect ourselves and protect ourselves, but also not be so isolated or guarded that we can't let anyone in and we're completely shut down either. So learning to trust ourselves is a process. And so then when we have a track record with ourselves that we can identify red flags and actually take heed and do something about them, rather than saying, okay, cool, I'll collect this red flag and then I'll add it to my list of things I'm going to fix about this person, and then the red flag won't be a red flag anymore. I think that's what people really do with the red flags. And instead we need to say, okay, indicator here, not necessarily good to keep going in this direction. And, maybe after a couple, you need to actually take a decisive action to remove yourself from the situation, or accept that you're just continuing to get involved with someone who's does not have the capacity to give you what you really desire and need. And then the last card is the Raven, magic, coincidence, synchronistic events. So I'm excited. So that on one hand, we're being invited to soon be willing to take a risk on the path, align with our truth, and then project that song of current truth. Who are we now? Who are we becoming? What is our character in this brand new timeline, in this great, grand new story that we are crafting? And, be trustworthy to yourself, and then you can learn who to trust and who not to trust by being honest and truthful with yourself, right? And not taking not taking bad risks, right? I don't know, I can't pull the right word. Calculated risks are kind of like risks that we have evaluated, we've kind of weighed them out, and we're taking them with eyes open, willing to take them, right? But what, like an uncalculated, a reckless risk, we don't want to be reckless. All right. And then trust the path, trust the direction of the path where it's taking you, but also don't blindly just follow, along and without any kind of self-possession or control, blindly just following what may seem like synchronicities, but discerning those synchronicities is another thing, because the opponent, the adversary, knows how to present synchronicities on the path as well. So again, tuning in to that integrity. Is this synchronicity reflecting my deepest truth in my spirit, or is this reflecting the truth of my egoic desire? Right? Is this reinforcing my own self-deception? All right. That's all for tonight. We will be back together tomorrow for our midweek alchemy message, where we've already surpassed that. We're on Thursday now. I was lost in time. But tomorrow we'll be back together for our weekend reflection message, where we will be sort of compiling the lessons of the week and putting it all together. All right. See you then. Ciao.